Chapter 5 Hell on Maka. I had met my Auntie Gail earlier that evening at the Prairie Knights Casino about 15 miles from camp. There was nothing much between the camps near Cannonball and the casino. There was a small bar I had not known about yet. Everything else was deer-populated valley of waving gold and rivers. I ordered a burger at the bar while I waited for another reply from Gail on my messenger. The wait for the burger was like sitting in a twilight zone. I seen people of all colors sitting around playing slots like zombies. My family was in a war zone, and watching the clueless gaming people made me fester with animosity. I was gonna scream, "Wake up!" But I wasn't sure if I could get through to the desensitized humanity that populated the casino slots. I was served a typical cheeseburger. It certainly wasn't restaurant style. I tried to remember that eating and seeing the auntie was my main priority. No need to flip the script here. I chewed my burger and my mouth watered with the ultimate satisfaction, even though I wasn't pleased with the beef's good looks. Burgers are my absolute favorite food. When a chef takes his burger seriously, you get a tender, juicy assortment of the freshest produce and cheese, different cuts of ground beef, fresh baked buns, and a house-made condiments like pickles, mayo, and ketchup. You can never take too much pride in a burger. To me, a burger was just about the whole food production industry in the palms of your hand. The sandwich had a little bit of everything. I wasn't anal about burgers, I just had higher expectations for a casino. I wouldn't have something like frozen pre-packaged patties on my menu. Perhaps I was anal, but before I blew a fuse, Gail and her husband asked me to come dine with them at the Hunters Club. I brought my burger and fries along in the crummy red plastic basket. I had only taken a bite, and what mattered most was I was able to sit down and chill with one of my favorite aunties and her husband I had yet to meet. I opened the large door to the quiet dining room. The first thing I see is Sitting Bull's face on what I thought was a Picasso painting from the movies. The carpet was red with a sort of Native American design I was familiar with. The chandeliers glowed a handsome bronze. Every 10 feet around the room was a stone column. Between the columns were pictures of Native American chiefs throughout time. Only the back wall remained frameless without chiefs. The back wall was painted with Native American hunters on their ponies scattering throughout a panoramic landscape. Auntie Gail tried to make sense of the geography while we ate. There was snowy, high, rocky mountains behind a golden prairie where the hunters shot out in different directions. We knew that's not how things work. We figured the painting was make-believe because of how close the snow-covered mountains and golden prairie was. Silently perplexed, though, I thought about how the Badlands became about out of the ordinary. That place was special, and I began to wonder about the traditional story about that place. Her and her husband made casual conversation with me over their own preference of steak and potatoes. They asked me if I wanted a menu, but I was good with my burger. We had a great talk. I told her the full story about what happened on the 27th. She was aware of what I had been through, and when I told the story, I appreciated that she didn't look at me like I had a third eye. She understood and shared her own possible conclusions about what happened. The scenario felt like a damned algebra equation. Her husband was a real cool dude, and I enjoyed listening to his input as well. He seemed upright and intelligent. When we were finishing up dinner, they asked me if I wanted to take the leftovers for later. I had to refuse. I was overcome with guilt. I thought to myself, everyone's back at camp eating soup and drinking mud. Here I am, eating burgers and steak. I felt like such a little bastard. I wanted to save the water so bad, but I was in a hurry to go nowhere. Somehow, even sitting in the fancy pants dining room felt awkward and counterfeit. There was a standoff going down the street, and people are staring at the slot machines and sipping wine. My auntie and her husband did well for themselves and deserved a steak and dessert on what could be their only vacation for the year. I had no clue, and it really wasn't any of my business. It's just, My conscience would keep taking 2 steps back and conclude this was the wrong place to be. It was hard getting comfortable here. I remember being on the front line a couple days before, and the only thing I ate all day was a burned hot dog. I got the ration from a guy who was providing support to keep the warriors energized and hydrated. It was probably the shittiest, ashiest wiener I ever ate, but I was so grateful for the scorched frankfurter. I remember closing my eyes with no choice but to savor what kept me standing 2 nights ago. I did my best to dismiss the memory. I had to finish dinner and get moving back to camp. I enjoyed being in Gail and her husband Spencer's company, but the fancy dining room felt like a kryptonite box. I had gotten back to camp roughly 30 minutes later. There was a search in progress for a few individuals who were out on unauthorized direct action. Driving around camp for an hour, I had done the bare minimal to search for the rogue warriors because secretly, I was supposed to be a part of that group. I knew it was the OG's plan from earlier that morning. It looked like his plans changed. It hadn't gone the way he expected. Even while we discussed plans that morning, we had not thought about what the Ochete Shakoan's reaction would be. After planning, Callie and I met at the agreed rally point and weren't a second late. No one was there. They had probably thought Callie was bringing around an infiltrator and decided to give us a fake time to meet up. I didn't have a bitter bone in my body about it. Instead, I did what I wanted for a change. I had the entire evening to myself. So I spent some more time around the Atazapcho fire before calling it a night. I was finally going to enjoy a proper night's rest. I had organized my vehicle to tip-top shape and was able to fold down the back seats. I had enough space to lay out 2 sleeping bags I had gotten from the donation tent. I took a baby white bath after I ate 2 chicken dinners, which were actually hard-boiled eggs from breakfast. I was prepared to lay down, but the night was still young. That evening, I had finally caught up with the relatives I camped with. Turns out, they're closer family than I ever would have imagined. My Auntie Gail was around, and she could best explain our family lineage, and so she told them whose grandkid I was. I remember Gail and her siblings when I was a young boy. We've had nothing but fun times together. When everyone's family tree calculations were finished, I had 20-year-old aunties and grandmas, cousins and uncles upon uncles, more than I could count. Sure, I could be exaggerating, but a few of the really young aunties did their best to joke around and make me feel like a puny baby nephew. There was even infants who could trump my authority if I let them. Turns out I was right where I belonged. Cheyenne River Itazipcho Camp. We were located at the main resistance camp, Ocheti Shakoin. I was among family, and it felt like I had died and went to heaven to meet long lost relatives and relatives I would only have met in the afterlife. I mean, how special was this? I thought it was an interesting way to look at things. My relatives loved me like it was so, and we were, in fact, surrounded by our ancestors. I understood these strangers, and I shared their humor. I had never felt like that in New York among strangers. On the East Coast, I was always turning a corner to meet an individual from the other side of the planet every 2 or 3 steps. The kitchen was an international sort of classroom, after all. I admired my career for that. However, I hadn't been back to the rest to say since I was 12 or so. I was a young 22-year-old man now. Being around these people was bringing out my inner child, and holding back felt like a sin. I had reached my limit to exhaustion because of my serious lack of rest. I was beginning to feel my eyes become fatigued and heavy. Settling down in my car, I had tossed and turned in my sleeping bag since about 11 o'clock. Things were getting chilly in the Dakotas. Things at camp were quiet. No drums or war whoops across camp. If there was any, I was too fast asleep to even mind them. I didn't dream of anything. Every 45 minutes or so, I would use the remote start to warm up the SUV without disturbing my own comfort. The temperature was getting colder, and the cold air was seeping through the cracks of my bent passenger door. The damages were new, and I hadn't known my car's thermal seal had been compromised. I was making good use of the North Face sleeping bags. I wouldn't have been very comfortable with a regular blanket. I got up to look again for my car's tiny remote, and I heard a great deal of hollering and commotion outside. The yelling reminded me of a drunk person losing his shit. I was laying with my head towards the front. I sat up and tried to make sense of the hysteria. I did a full 360 sweep of my surroundings, and I noticed a glow far off from the front of my vehicle. The glow was an animated bright orange. It looked like a giant bonfire. Then I thought, shit, we're going to war again? It had to be another barricade on fire. I put my pants and socks on over my bare legs and feet. I had decided to go all out and get cozy as possible. I had forgot I was in a war zone. They definitely caught me sleeping. What was I thinking? I reached for my phone and recorded what I was witnessing. Alright, so I'm just getting up. I don't even know what time it is. It's 2:35 in the morning. And I'm looking over the hill. I'm sleeping in my car. And you can't really see it from over here, but it's a fire up there, and it's way bigger than it looks. It looks like they must have set the field on fire, and all the grass is on fire over there. I don't know if you can see that. I think you can see that. Yeah, it's way up there. I'm gonna go check that. It was 2:35 a.m. The vehicle was already warm and was ready to haul ass. I finished getting dressed and quickly jumped into the cockpit. I put the SUV in drive and rolled all the windows down to raise my own awareness. I only had to briefly push down all four window buttons at the same time, and the intelligent steel pony would automatically finish the job. I had parked accordingly this time, but they caught me with my pants down. Hit the gas and headed north towards Flag Road. It was like the red stone pony was alive and had a sense of urgency on its own. Pony galloped toward the fire with great speed and agility over the gravel terrain. I didn't have a radio and had no way of being alerted of the fire. But it seemed like I had gotten there early. I heard a warrior named Undertaker on his radio getting directions from someone I hadn't known on the other end. He turned towards us after pacing around on his walkie. Camp is on lockdown. No one in or out until daylight. The native men who responded seemed well seasoned and disciplined. The warriors acknowledged the order, taking it seriously. Fire was getting closer. I had wondered what would happen when the fire reached 1806. Would the embers find a way to spread across the road into camp, or would we all be smoked out? Nevertheless, whoever started this fire wasn't a friend. The only thing I could think of was this weird small grenade Dapple shot over the barricade into the grass a couple nights before. The intense heat that burst out of the grenade caught the tall grass by the backwater bridge on fire. It made us rather upset, and we had a short-lived victory when the fire was stomped out. It wasn't a smoke grenade or an incendiary grenade. It had to be a dud of a concussion grenade. I thought about it for a long time in those days, and today, that's the only thing that makes sense. It was a possibility. I felt like whoever had done this was watching us scramble from the top of the hill. I was going up there sometime tonight, and I hope the arsonist got real comfortable. Focus, Max, I thought to myself. This is all just a trick to get us upset, a heinous attempt to aggravate us. It's like psyop shit or something. Don't accept the invitation to become angry or upset. Keep it simple, stupid, and just do your job. I pulled the black plastic cuffs from my back pocket, the only warrior's merit I had that indicated I had captured an enemy. If you didn't know my story, you wouldn't believe the truth behind the cuffs. I always brought them along when trouble was about, just in case. Remember why you're here. A few of us stood back and watched the fire while everyone else took up their positions. I left the red SUV on the top of the hill with the hazards blinking. I walked back down the incline to North Gate and routinely shared my chuns with the relatives dressed in black that I had never met before. It was the whole reason I purchased cigarettes. I figured it was always good juju in Indian country to offer a stranger tobacco. I would rarely ever finish a cigarette, but that would change soon too. I had a seat next to the small fire in front of gate number 1 by the main entrance. The warriors who protected the camp borders needed a fire at all times. I had to take care of the warriors who kept the people safe, and the night watch was becoming colder and colder. The small fire did the trick while my body adjusted to the cold morning. I wore a black sweatshirt with a black bubble coat to suffice. I had what I needed to keep warm, but somehow the temperature started to dive. I had thoughts about the wind coming in from the cold river in the east. It would be a great help if the wind really did change direction. The flames would probably lick the opposite direction of camp. We sure could use the miracle. Then I heard an outcry that cut my thoughts short. Excuse me! Could we get some help, please? It was a couple yelling from near the sacred fire. There were 4 of us total at the checkpoint, so one warrior and myself went to go check things out. I depended on him for his radio. He was my only link to the rest of the camp and its sleeping warriors. The red war pony above North Gate kept flashing its blinkers. I was confident that no one would mess with my vehicle. We walked over and made contact with the people. The young woman who was wrapped in a blanket over her coat seemed very annoyed. There's a drunk guy over there, and he's yelling and screaming. He's trying to wake everyone up for an attack on Dapple because of the fire, said the boyfriend, cutting his annoyed girlfriend off. The two held each other close as we followed them to the intoxicated agitator. We were walking toward the camp I was just in a slumber next to. Aha! This is the same drunk that woke my ass up in the first place. I probably should have checked it out before I hauled ass to Northgate. And then I felt duty bound to take care of this once and for all. We finally had the stumbling white man in our sights. He was coming right at us with big news. The young native with the radio chirped in and asked what to do with the man. We casually closed the distance of about 5 meters. Hey guys! I reached past his armpit between his arm and torso and got a good grip on his right bicep and shoulder. I simply walked around him, pivoting him 180 degrees. The young warrior in black caught on quick. He got the same grip on the other side, and we walked him backwards toward the sacred fire in North Gate. Mumbling on the radio began chirping in, and the warrior said, Yeah, we're taking him to North Gate. I shook the drunk man and said, You gonna be okay? Can you walk on your own without any problems? Yeah, man, I can walk, he giggled out. I still didn't feel confident in letting him walk freely. I wasn't interested in a chicken run around camp. We stopped and turned him 180 degrees again and proceeded towards 1806. So you guys are just gonna walk me around like this? We didn't answer the Washuchu. We got to North Gate and released him to be looked at by an elder. I believe it was Undertaker yet again who was communicating to the leaders on the walkie. Undertaker looked to be 35 years old. I suppose this young warrior I was working with is only around 20 as well, and we knew the code. We had better let an elder take responsibility for this cat. Undertaker seemed to be annoyed with the slow radio response. It was probably 3 a.m. now, and the fire was still inching toward our camp. I had an urge to be somewhere else, but I was compelled to get to the end of babysitting. A few silent moments went by, and the man whom I believed to be Undertaker became irritated and spoke up. I have a camp to keep safe. We gotta let him go on his way. If he wants to come back for his things, I have to wait until daylight when the gates are open. Sober. We pushed him up the incline out of Northgate. He stumbled backwards past my vehicle, and the young white man cursed us all the way past the reservation border. He wore a hat and jacket, so I wasn't all that worried about him dying out there. It was time to do my part for the lockdown. I told the boys at the North Gate I was going to post up at the South Bridge to inform any incoming cars that camp was closed, and they had to wait in an appointed area until sunrise. I was thanked, and I was told to stay warm. I ignited the red Pegasus and cranked the heat up. In drive now, I slowly made my way towards Southgate. I never turned my blinkers off. It felt very appropriate to keep them on, even though my vehicle was the only one to populate the asphalt road. I parked directly in the middle of the bridge. I figured any more rabid dapple workers on a road rage would have a hard time passing me. A few people who were at Southgate earlier came to the bridge to check on me. They were young people. We introduced ourselves, and they hung out in the warm heat with me in the pony. They had a radio, and I had asked for it a few times to see what was being communicated over the lockdown. One of the young men had remembered he dropped the radio off the bridge earlier that night. He lacked a flashlight and had trouble finding the Cobra walkie-talkie on his own. We looked over the edge for it, and the only young lady of our group kept her flashlight over the walkie as sort of a marker. The gentleman who dropped it went around the bridge and down the hill to go get it. When he returned, he handed me the walkie. I took the walkie apart and seen it took AAA batteries. I had an expensive box of them in the center console for no reason. I replaced the batteries and the radio chirped to life. I was told to tune to channel 7. They remind me of the words seventh generation. I thanked the group of young people like myself and awarded them the last of my cigarettes. After that, I was alone again.
It was a cold night. I was sleeping in the back of the truck, and around 6 in the morning, well, 4, 6 o'clock around that time, I I was woken by just a little bit of commotion. And if you've been in Standing Rock, you know that there's a constant surveillance and there's a constant um, aliveness that's going through the camp. And when I woke up, I could see that there was this glow over the horizon. I hopped out of my truck and walked up to kind of see if anyone had any information on what was going on. And I ran into a friend of mine there, and he says, "Yep, there it is. Like they're setting fire now to the prairie, and they're attempting to burn us out from camp." And I was like, "Well, what are we doing? Like, what's to be done?" And the guy said to me, he said, I won't name names here, but he said, "Well, you got a phone, don't you?"
A couple hours passed, and I asked a couple people from Southgate to hold the bridge down. A few vehicles had come in and were informed of the lockdown. They seen the fire on the hill and seemed to understand why no one would be allowed admission. No one argued about getting in around daylight time, and everyone stacked up just outside of Southgate to be monitored until things were cool. I drove the pony back to Northgate to check on things, leaving South Bridge without a barricade. I took my time getting to the camp entrance. When I arrived, there was a couple older white males looking up at the hill ablaze. I got out to touch base. They looked motivated to scout the hilltop. Approaching them, I eavesdropped on what my nearing distance would allow. Yeah, the wind shifted direction all right. That fire really slowed down, and you can see it's not progressing as well as before. It seemed as if making note of the temperature drop earlier was the correct conclusion. It was almost an instinct, and those same instincts were kicking in again. The two men had agreed they could see a moving figure about the flames, but weren't 100% sure. I was. I knew someone got too comfortable with our safe reaction to the fire and decided to wander around the scorched grassland. "I know my truck can make it up. I've been through worse ground than this. I think we could take another vehicle just to be safe, though," said one of the two men. I knew what they were indirectly asking, and I wasn't going to let them down. "Look, I'm coming, but my vehicle can't make it all the way to the top. Halfway up, I have to bail. I'll ride with you after that." We had a tacit agreement and just entered our vehicles. The only access we had to the blazing hilltop was directly across from the north gate. I started my way through the cattle guard entrance first. The first few feet introduced a sort of alertness that came with anxiety. "We're through," I thought. "No turning back unless you have something useful to bring home." Part of me wanted to predict that multiple UTVs were waiting to ambush us past the fire, waiting behind the licking flames that were the only light the early morning had to offer. The topography of the trail upwards worsened, and sure enough, halfway up the hill, I had to park the pony. I had brought my pocket knife, ski mask, and special plastic handcuffs with me before I locked the vehicle. I left the cell phone inside with my other possessions. I put my car keys inside the small gas tank door that clicked closed. I quickly ran over and jumped in the back of this black Nissan Raptor, which looked pretty badass and seemed worthy of climbing a mountain. The mud tires and lift kit looked stock. I grabbed onto the black, Nerf-lined light bar in the back of the truck above the cab. We began moving, and even though I had a good grip on that bar, the momentum of the vehicle bouncing up and down knocked me on my ass a number of times. I lost count. I knew I would be pretty bruised up in the morning, but I didn't scream for help or ask them to stop. I had relived thoughts from when I was a young punk. It reminded me of that time I was jumped into that gang when I was 12 years old. The beating couldn't last forever. It had to stop sometime. I had figured I'd better cowboy up and ride. A few moments later, of being a violent rag doll had passed. We made it to the top, and the ground was level. The surface seemed to be pretty flush compared to the hillside. I could stand up with no issues at all. My self-control acquired a major improvement. I scanned my naked indigenous eyes left and right through the ski mask. I looked as far as the pitch black darkness would allow. Not even the stars lit up the sky. Only the fire would lend us a hand, might even help us make out a silhouette. We drove around in circles around the scorched black hilltop, which seemed to be bigger than a football field. The ebony darkness was like charcoal, and the burning prairie looked like a glimpse from a fiery hell. I was beginning to think there wasn't any dappled thugs laying in the grass after all. The truck made an odd, slow stop. The passenger hollered out the window and pointed 2 o'clock from the nose of the Raptor. Maybe my mask was affecting my hearing. I pushed it up even if it didn't make a difference. I didn't hear what the man had said, but there was a figure far off and crouching low trying to avoid to be seen. The figure dropped to the ground. Bingo! My heart dropped to my stomach and I grabbed the cuffs in my back pocket. I slipped my ski mask down and gave the cab a quick double tap with an open palm. They tapped back, acknowledging that I was ready to move in. The Raptor gently and gradually accelerated to a great speed that I could maneuver my hips to. My logic was to use the lower half of my body as a suspension. As we got faster, I got better at keeping my balance. There we were, a black steel horse galloping across hell together to capture another member of the cavalry. 40 meters, 30 meters, 20 meters, 10. We closed the distance and the agile Raptor swerved to a complete stop. The dirt that grinded beneath the tires implied we weren't fucking playing, and homie better break himself because he was there all alone in what indeed looked like hell on earth. I was whipped off the rear end of the Nissan and was able to stick a nice landing. I had already been prepared to jump. The landing was an accident, but it was behind me now. I had a white sheep in front of me, and I was licking my chops for dinner.
I knew that they'd probably stop me or they wouldn't want me to go up into the fire because there was, just no one know what was going on. And it's 4 in the morning, 4 or 6 o'clock in the morning. It's pitch dark out, and I ended up just taking my camera and just heading up into the hill. And it's probably a 100 to 300 foot little hill that the fire was on top, and I started walking up and started to give a surveillance over the land, and you could see just down the highway towards the dappled digging that the fire just kept on going in a straight line. I mean, it was a perfect straight line, and it was as if someone was back burning the area. And so I hopped on past, did some reporting, some live feeds going on. Somehow I got a signal up on that hill, which is, the reception was always spotty, to say the least, in that area. So I was able to pull a line or pull a feed, and I was able to do a live kind of presentation or a documentation of the fire. And as I was kind of scoping around and kind of walking along the top ridge line, I kind of just turned around and looked over the camp, and I could see this through the haze of the fire. I could see this truck pop out of nowhere. And I mean, I just nearly shit my pants. I had no idea who it was, what was going on. I know that no one knew that I was up there at that time, and there was just a lot of panic in myself, and the only thing I could do was just fall down to the ground and just hope that it wasn't the police or someone who was coming after me at that time.
It was a frightened man. His pale, white face was bare of any facial hair, and he was skinny. He wore a knitted cap and a scarf that didn't match along with a dark jacket. At face value, he looked harmless. He stumbled backwards with his hands up and began explaining fast. I don't have any weapons. I'm not with Dapple or anything. I'm here to document and that's it, I swear. You can check me out, man. I have a press pass on my person. I'm camped out here. Whoa, this guy was scared shitless. Perhaps he thought we were Dapple too while he was hiding. I took my ski mask off and relaxed a bit, but not too much. I could still hear my heart pounding, adrenaline alongside my inner reasoning. Was I really gonna bag this guy if he was the enemy? Hell yeah, I was, I thought to myself, blood drumming. Dude, hill is on fire. You're up here alone. Crazy man? You shouldn't be up here. I yelled at him like I was yelling at my kids for setting the house on fire. I hollered some sense into him and told him he had no choice but to come with me. I knew the elders would want a debriefing. That was a given. He surrendered and hadn't disagreed with me one bit. He hopped in the back of the Raptor with me. I wasn't going to waste my priceless handcuffs on this one. Besides, he was going to need his hands for the ride back.
The truck just clearly could see me and beelined it right at me, and out jumps this individual with another fellow, and they had the security Ocheti Sakoan security band, and this was there was the security of the camp that came out, and they immediately started questioning me, and I in all the confusion, I like couldn't find my pass at that time, and they said, get in the truck, and I jumped in, and all I started to do was just try to rattle off names of people through the camp that I thought might be helpful, and it was that I was speaking with at this time, and he and I were on this truck just hightailing it off the mountain, and he was calm, and he was quiet, and he listened. He wasn't at all an individual who was assuming that who I was. He just was looking out, one, for my safety, and he also wanted to protect the people at camp because no one knew what had happened. And he told me that that I would have to, speak with his superior officers at the time, and I said I'd speak with anybody, and I was apologizing, profusely at that time, and he gently just told me, like how dumb of a thing I just did, and how stupid it was for me to go in there because who knows what could happen. It was a war zone, and there are plays that were done that that the whoever was opposing the oil pipeline being built, it could have been a plan for something, and it was my naivety that kind of kicked in, and I just said I wasn't thinking, and he was cool all the way down, and he brought me to the front gate, and the driver kind of took off, and he said, stay here with the rest of the security, and he's going to go find out what to do with me and what type of interrogation or type of reprimandation I was going to get.
It's not like I took him for face value and let my guard down. I was just being generous, even if he was undercover. I spoke to him as calm, cool, and collected as my adrenaline would allow. The black truck began the expedition back to Ocheti Shikoni. I knew better than even try and stand up. Instead, I leaned back into a corner by the tailgate. I used my arms and legs to suspend my bottom from bashing the cargo bed of the sporty Nissan. The truck hadn't gone as fast downhill as it did going up, but I still kind of enjoyed seeing the man thrash around the steel box we sat in. I had to bargain some sensitivity for my own amusement. I considered it a sort of trickle down humor when you knew that pain because you had been there yourself. I casually revealed his own carelessness to him. I told him the possibilities of going out alone. I also explained that they could ultimately project the blame on him for starting the fire, even if the charges didn't make any logical sense. The loan document driven man didn't do so bad, though. He snuck past me while I had my back turned, and I must admit he was brave for documenting the fire on his own, too. There's no way he could get permission to document that close to the fire if he had just asked. He risked being a target by either side. Sure, we're a bit more merciful on our side of the bridge, but this ballsy journalist made himself the latest coyote bait. Fine example of a common man's courage of his own convictions to me. He still wasn't off the hook. After all, I didn't know if this stranger was on a mission to discredit us or what. I sat him down at the North Gate fire and told him to stay put. I told the warriors at the gate to get his press info and ID. I also told them to review what he had captured on his device and to review his credentials. I looked at the cooperative man. Don't move, I commanded. He stayed put. Our encounter was roughly at 6 a.m. Exhausted and emotional, I had forgotten about the Washichu for a short 20 minutes. I passed by Northgate, not even remembering his face or that I had told someone to stay there. I was in need of some sleep. I had never gone 72 hours without a decent rest before and had made note of how it affected my mental capacity. He had to stop me himself and ask me if he was free to go. I looked at this fellow who was unrecognizable at first. I felt a bit embarrassed, but I chuckled my native humor out and apologized.
And I remember just sitting there at the campfire. It's I think it's the south entrance that it was, or south or north entrance. I forget which one it was. And I'm just sitting there at the campfire. They have a constant vigilance there of security, and there was two other guards who were there, and I struck up a conversation, and I told them that what I had done, and they were surprised that I'd even gone up there, and I told them that I just kind of hopped over the fence to get there as quick as possible, and I was there probably for about 10 minutes, and came back, and he said, I showed him my past by that time, and they understood that I knew my role as I was a reporter for the camp there, and he said, just be more careful in the future, and if I am going to do something, he walked me through the rules, and he was helpful of how to establish a unified protocol at camp, and he really let me know that what's outside of camp is a dangerous place to be. The hard work of the volunteers, working day and night. I think there would have been would have been a lot more violence than the violence that was even brought against the camp in the first place. So I'm grateful for what he's done for the movement and what he's done to protect. I think the enlightened group of Americans that showed up. So thanks. It's a pleasure to be your friend. It's a pleasure to have met you in a brief moment in my young years, but it will be a moment that I'll never forget.
I instructed him to go to Media Hill and submit his videos. I also gave him instructions on how to properly document on the front lines, especially if it was urgent. He acknowledged. I wouldn't hear from this person for another year. Proud of the warriors and myself, I started my way down Flag Road to my Tiosh Baye. Just another day in Ocheti. It took 8 hours for these guys to show up. We took care of this fire. Spent all night looking for the goons who did this. Camp's been on lockdown. Everything's been on lockdown. I've been escorting people out of camp. I've been just, it's been a busy night. Just trying to keep the camp safe. And I'm proud of all the warriors today. Everybody. I'm proud of everybody.